I'm so excited. We are live. If you were here last week, I know a couple of you said you were trying to find the live stream. I don't know if I should apologize because it wasn't my fault, but we had both Facebook and Instagram. I tried for over 20 minutes to go live. We could not go live here. I tried on Instagram. I guess there was something going on that was affecting that. I'm predicting that they're rolling out something new because usually when we have some tech fails like this, I've had something, I don't know if y'all have noticed this in the DMs with some people on Instagram. I'm getting this like crazy coding. Anyway, whenever we see stuff like that, it usually tells me that they're rolling out something new. So we'll have to see if that is in fact true or if it was just a text glitch. But oh my gosh, tech glitch. But I'm very excited to be here with y'all. This is the conversation we're gonna have last week, but it's actually great for our last live stream of the year. I was gonna do, originally today, we were going to do a little bit more end of year planning, my word of the year, some of the rituals, practices I have for the end of the year. If you're interested in that, let me know because I think we did this last year, maybe the year before. I did a live stream like that and I used the same practices. I can always find the link for that and share the replay with you. But today we're going to have the conversation we're going to last year, which is increased profits in fewer hours, what worked in 2024 and what's next for 2025. And I've got quite a bit I want to share on this with you. Before I dive in, I'm trying to think if I have any announcements for you. Last live of the year. We will be back in the new year. We'll actually miss the first live stream at the beginning of the year because it is January 1st. I would go live for y'all, but I don't think any of you will actually be live. So we'll have our first live that week afterwards. And I believe we'll be sharing some predictions for next year. I already have a list of those. I'm making myself get clear on those before I hear anybody else's predictions because I don't want to be swayed by those and I want to share what's coming up for me with you in the new year. So you can stay tuned to that. And in terms of availability, I always like to let you all know that I have very limited spots opening up for Q1. I did open up some additional spots the last few months because I had closed down some capacity this year, but those have filled up. I believe we have a spot that is opening up in January. So I have, I believe, one-on-one spot that we can still fill for January, and then we're looking to the rest of Q1. So if you hear this conversation, if you're thinking about 2025 and looking for support to grow or scale, whether you're really wanting to build a foundation to take yourself to your first six figures, or you're really in that place where you're ready to double and triple your revenue, learn how to think like a CEO, how to do that sustainably, that is a big part of my sweet spot and what I support clients with on both the growing and the scaling side. I'll drop a link for a free coaching consultation. I always offer those. They're very valuable. I've had people tell me those alone have given them really great insights that they've gone on to turn into revenue. So it's sort of a, I don't know, win-win, even if we don't work together, but fit is incredibly important to me. So I do still require a consultation if you want to work together. Okay, let's dig into today's conversation because otherwise I'll just be chatty Cathy. I feel like it's like end of the year vibes. I'm all in the chatty Cathy mode, but I've got quite a bit I want to share here that feels really important. If you got the email twice now for this, since we missed it the first time around, something I said here, and I feel like I've been a broken record about this for years, but it feels particularly present for me as we get to the end of the year because I know this is when people are talking about their revenue numbers, are looking to next year's numbers and sharing goals. And look, I am here for everybody focusing on big revenue goals and big revenue numbers. I think that's great. And I think, for some businesses, that's actually really important as well in terms of what's going to make you profitable and in terms of what's going to allow you to create the impact you want to. So I am here for that. I understand it's really important in business. And I think something we always or don't always talk about that I think is so important is to look at the profitability of a business and the sustainability of a business. I say this so often, so excuse me if you've heard me say this before, but it's not just the top line revenue. I'm not saying that doesn't matter, but it's not only the top line revenue that matters, it's how you make that revenue, right? If you do something just to make a quick buck or because that's what someone told you to do, or I don't know, that's the quick, easy way to do it, or that's the model you heard would help you scale, but you hate it and you can't sustain it, or it burns you out, or you have to work 80 hours per week, great, you're going to make great money for 6 months to a year, but you're not going to be able to make that year after year. So how you make your money matters. Your profitability matters. Of course, there's going to be times we give up some of our profit margins. When you're growing your business, your first 6 figures, usually you aren't as profitable because you don't have the margins there, and usually we do have to double down on investments in terms of support. I mean, there's just so many things there like that. You usually do have to spend money to make money. That is very true. I usually say around the 15 to 20K per month. That's why I really love to support clients to get to 250K years and above. I think that's when we get to be a little bit more profitable depending on your business model. So there's also times when you're scaling where you might give up some of your profits upfront so that you can set yourself up to scale, investing in more team members, maybe more infrastructure, maybe coaching, maybe training, right? So there are definitely times I've done, there are times that I have given up. I care deeply about profit margins, but that I have given up part of my profit margin so that I can be in the position I'm in today, so that I can scale my business, so that we can be more profitable long term. So profitability matters, but I don't want you to hear that as like the goal is to have 100% profitability. Usually if that's the case, you're actually leaving money on the table or you're burning yourself out. And then what you do with your money matters. So those are the three things there. And I think, in years past, I've done a breakdown of, hey, Alyssa, yay, it's working. I know, I'm so excited. Alyssa, I was like, is it just me last week? Tech is not my thing. I just got a new MacBook, so I thought it was my computer. But anyway, it was, I think the Instagram, Facebook was having a whole moment. Anyway, let me go back to our conversation here. So in past years, I've done more of a breakdown on I've added 100K to my revenue or different things like that and kind of shown the breakdown in terms of what's gone into those numbers. This year, what I wanted to do is share a little bit more, because this conversation I'm having with clients just feels so important, to share a little bit more about what's true with my numbers, but then also some of the learnings and unlearnings that have gone into my numbers for this year. So I'm going to share what I'm celebrating, and then this is a little bit more from the strategy side of what I think this has been one of my most transformative and growth-oriented years in business, and I'll explain why. So I want to share a couple of those pieces that I've either unlearned or learned or implemented that's really helped me to sustain multi-six figures, but we've also increased my profit margins and decreased my working hours. So that combination together feels pretty special. So I'm going to share that with you and break that down. It's a little less on the mindset side of things, though there is a whole lot to that. So if y'all want me to break that down in another live stream, let me know, because I do think there's some things I definitely leaned into, but I want to share a little bit more, because I think this is the year I've probably changed more in my business in terms of maybe the practical strategy, like the tactical pieces. And so I thought that might be helpful for everybody here just to have a look behind the scenes. So just kind of for context there, I have a multi-six figure business. We make between 300 to 350, 60, 70, depending on revenue share per year. I made a little bit more than last year in terms of top line revenue, but what's exciting is I am paying myself significantly more, and I've always had a really healthy and great profit margin, and there's various reasons, for why. I'll explain some of those reasons for why or how we increase profit margins. But this year I will pay myself multi-six figures, which feels like a big deal. And in full transparency, I will pay myself multi-six figures. That's before I account for taxes, because I don't actually, legally, we get quite a few things that are, that I get to write off as taxes, including my investments. So I'm not exactly sure what that final number will be. But just for context there, so I'm celebrating not only sustaining healthy multi-six figures, but paying myself multi-six figures. That feels like a really big deal. And look, this isn't a competition in the online space, but I want to have this conversation more, because I think so often we chase the top line revenue. We chase making $1 million, for example, and that's wonderful. But paying yourself multi-six figures, I don't make $1 million per year in my business yet, per year in top line revenue, but I'm paying myself as much as, if not more than many businesses making 2, 3, 4 times as much as me. And again, it's not a competition. It doesn't make one better or worse, but I think these are sometimes the things we don't think about when we're choosing what's the right business model for us. It would be really easy for me to think I'm supposed to make $1 million to prove something online, and to pick a different business model that would allow me to do that, I don't know, easier or faster, so I could prove something, but it would make me miserable. And I'd probably end up paying myself about the same. And again, one is not better or worse. This isn't throwing shade on someone who has a smaller profit margin. That's not what I'm saying at all. But there is a better or worse for you in terms of choosing the right model for you. And so I think when we can understand these things, it makes it easier, instead of feeling like, oh, well, if I pick this thing I really want to do, I'm going to sacrifice. Then I can't have what I want. And I want to help you see that actually, if we take a look at what's kind of under the hood and what's happening in terms of the profitability, right? A lot of times you really can't have what you want. It just might look a little different. And I just think it matters so much that you're picking the work you want to do, and the model you want, and those trade-offs that fit and serve you, because that's what it's going to allow you, not only sustainability, but longevity in business. But I'm working fewer hours than I ever have in my 8.5 years in business. I love to work, so I do work a full week, but this year I took Fridays, I had Flex Fridays, I took Fridays off. I did, in full transparency, start bringing back about 2, I might bring back 3 in the new year Fridays per month, because I frankly just I like working. I did a VIP day last Friday, so I used the Friday for a VIP day, and I just loved it. I kind of miss my clients, so we'll see how that goes. But I worked far few hours than I have, and then again, we increased profit margin. So that's what we're talking about. But I also increased expenses. Even though my profit margin went down, I added on things like ads this year, which we're going to talk about. I invested in learning ads, right? There's some in coaching around that. So in some ways, it would have seemed like I would have spent more, but actually our expense, well, our profit margin went up. I don't know that our expenses went down as much as our profit margin went up because of the way the revenue played out there. I also think this is one of the years, again, that I made the most changes, shifts, and unlearned the most. I think sometimes we think we're supposed to learn in business. And look, there are definitely new things I learned. I learned how to run ads, for example, but so often what I'm supporting clients with, and I think this is maybe a little on the mindset side of things, and so often what I'm reaching out to my coach for, yes, it's strategic decisions. Of course, it's learning new skill sets. Ads is a new skill set, for example. I'm really grateful I learned that. I'm always like want to knock on wood. I am crushing ads in terms of our ad spend, and it's been really great because I can support my clients with this now. This is a skill set I have for them. But what I see I support so much of my clients with, and that I need support with as well, as unlearning all of the things society has taught us, that the industry has taught us, the things that are just really unhelpful and getting in our own way. Okay, I don't see questions, but throw questions at me. I feel like I'm giving a lot of context here, but I'm hoping that it's helpful. But let's dig into some of these things I had to unlearn and some of the things I had to do. And then I got a bonus lesson there. There's 5 I'm going to break it down to. Okay, so the first one here, and again, these are more practical, tactical, a little less on the mindset side of things, so some mindset might come into this as well. One of the really big shifts I made this year, and it was actually quite a big unlearning for me and a big shift from the way I've kind of always done things in business, is unlearning, so this is what I did not do, but unlearning the idea of repurposing my content and having a strategy to be, in air quotes, omnipresent everywhere. So I'm going to explain what I mean. I think we've probably talked about this in different ways in this group. I think this is something I imagine most of you are aware of, but I think it might be really helpful to hear how this then impacts things like the time you're spending in business and profitability. Up until I'd say probably this year, I was really heavy on really focused on a repurposing strategy. I coached my clients around that. We relied quite heavily on repurposing, and repurposing in terms of not necessarily regurgitating the same posts everywhere, but I had a podcast. I would take my podcast, I would take my live stream. We would use that content to pull pieces out. I had a copywriter who would pull pieces out, so my words would like turn that into content into posts. And then, really our goal is like, how can we put this in many places as possible? And then also, sometimes, I was traveling or busy, we would repurpose new content. We stopped doing that at the beginning of this year. I really saw a shift happening probably towards the end of last year. I started talking about this. I was just really digging into and noticing just a shift in reach and engagement. I study my marketing. I am a nerd for it. I love it. It's why I like helping clients with it. But I am that person who is looking at that every week, and just from curiosity and just wanting to know what's working, what's not working, what's going on, what are trends, but also just what is the conversation that's happening. And I just really saw such a shift in how much of that content just wasn't landing the way it was in the past. And I don't think we could almost have a whole conversation on that. So I made a shift, and a couple of shifts there that happened. We stopped repurposing, pulling stuff from podcasts, from live stream. And this was something, if this is helpful to hear, this was something I was, up until then, I was coaching clients around, and we were investing in, because it just saved me a lot of time as a one-on-one coach as well. I would go live, I would share my content, then to have someone be able to then pull from my words, pull some content out of that, and then I would just kind of edit that. I just really don't see that content performing very well right now. And I also, just in terms of being omnipresent, I think there was, especially in 2020 and pre-2020, but especially I think in 2020 when things got really busy, I think in some ways there was a little bit of a strategy of how can you be seemingly everywhere all the time. And not that quality wasn't important, but I do think there was a little bit of just how much can you show up. And the more places you can be, the more it's going to benefit you in business. Now, look, if you are Gary Vee and I just listened to something he said, he's 37 people on his team for his brand. If you have 37 people on your team for your brand who can effectively repurpose content in a way where it seems like a fresh piece of content, maybe that's the context I should give there. I'll come back to that. then being omnipresent is always going to be beneficial, right? If you figure out how to hack AI or to use AI in a way where it doesn't sound like AI, because let's be honest, most of us can tell a ChatGPT post, like I can sniff that out from a mile away. I love my clients so much, but sometimes they share me, like when I see something like, no, we gotta like, we have to edit this a little bit. This just sounds like it like stinks of ChatGPT, right? Like if that's the case, then being omnipresent doesn't do you any good. The way the algorithm is working right now is it's really, it's not even going to put your content in front of people. So you can pump it out on all the channels and all of the places, and 3 people are going to see it. I would really rather post out less content that is well thought out, that is quality, that people want to hear, that is specific to the platform, that hundreds and thousands of people see and engage with. And so it's not to say that being omnipresent is something I unlearned or that I don't think works in 2020, or didn't work in 2024, won't work in 2025. I just think for most of us as small business owners, even if you have a team of say 5 to 10, it's probably going to be a really tough thing to do, especially as we're moving into 2025. And I think AI is just going to be so much more a part of our world, which I think is going to affect content. And I think affect the way we're all wanting to crave, like we're wanting to connect and buy from one another, what we are consuming. So anyway, with that, this was something I really had to unlearn, and I had to learn a whole new way of creating content, literally a whole new way of creating content, a new way of showing up. That meant some shifts in processes, some shifts in team, but even some shifts in thinking about what does that mean in terms of, you know, what we're posting, how we're sharing. What I think today, so maybe this is a bit of other helpful content. The reason for this as well, in terms of like, I don't think repurposing content is bad. Today we still repurpose content, but I really think of repurposing content today as a tool to buy back time when it's a busy season, knowing it's probably not going to perform that well, but it buys back some time that lets me be present versus a tool to generate leads and sales. And I think that's the big difference. In the past, I was using that for leads and sales. I don't expect repurposed content to generate leads and sales for me. Look, it can. I'm not saying that it won't, but that is just not what I'm generally expecting it to do. I use repurposing today as a tool to buy back time, or in seasons where we're busy or we've got a lot going on, or we need to fill in gaps or something like that. And so I'm not saying we don't repurpose content, but in terms of how I'm thinking about it and how we're using it, it's definitely not to be omnipresent. It's to buy back time. It's definitely not to get leads and sales. It's to buy back time. And I think the big reason for that is platforms have gotten so specific. And I think then, so it's hard to take something, say, from a podcast, just pull it into some posts and then turn that into something that's going to be really specific for a reel on Instagram and on Facebook and on LinkedIn. So that was a big shift. That was a big shift we made. And one of the reasons I think this helped support, and I know I said I worked less hours and increased profit margins, this would seem like it's more work. But I'll explain more because I dropped my podcast. So we shifted things around here. But what I really saw is it helped us to create less and do less better. You're going to see a theme of that throughout this conversation. And, you know, I was paying a copywriter. I was paying more people to, repurposing was not free. Repurposing was actually quite a big expense in my business. It was worth it because of the time it bought back for me. But it stopped being worth it when I looked at the data to see that in 2024. And when I looked at not just the data, but what I thought the data was telling me in terms of where I saw the industry going and the return that was going to get me, this became an expense that didn't make sense in terms of the ROI. So we dropped some of those expenses, which, you know, were significant and gave us back some of that profitability. So just to explain, like, to help link in that connection there. Anybody has questions around that, let me know. Otherwise, I'll go on to the next one. Okay, so the next thing I had to unlearn. So this is not what I'm saying is the thing. It's the thing I had to unlearn, is that doing more means getting more. This is maybe a little bit of mindset, a little bit of practical. I think this one is for all of my high achievers, probably our biggest work. I feel like this is my like lifelong learning at every stage of business, y'all, at like every level. I feel like I have to unlearn this or unlearn another layer. And because I love my work, I love to work, but I'm so wired with that like hardworking gene. And like, I'm gonna give lots of nuance and context here, but I have a tendency to think if you like need to do, my mom would always say this, she's like, if someone told you need to do 10 push-ups, you're the person who will just do like 30. You know what I mean? Like I just want to do more and more, and I just will do more, and I have quite a large capacity for that. And so I think this year more than any, I really unlearned a lot of that and really got back to think I've always kept things simple, but doing less better, and seeing how doing more really and truly doesn't get you more. And I think, so here's all the nuance. I think just some nuance and some context. Of course, to some degree in business, doing more does get you more. I think it would be a lie if I said that. And so for the person who has a hard time showing up, for the person who has a hard time getting into action, for the person who has a hard time kind of doing the bare minimum, this is not your unlearning. Your unlearning might be kind of more around the antithesis, the opposite of this. For all of my high achievers, hard workers, borderline workaholics, right? People who self-soothe with working, people who buffer with working, people who, when they're anxious, want to do more and more and more. I think there's a lot of different things here that can cause us to fall into this bucket. I think for you, I want you to hear this. For those of you, again, who have a hard time showing up or being consistent, or who, I have one client who comes to mind who got really burnt out in the past. And so I know a lot of our work has been in actually helping her to feel safe doing more work, because that, I think if you've been burnt out doing any kind of work too much, can feel like, oh my gosh, I hit that burnout again. So if that's you, I still want you to listen to this, but more from the place of like to help create safety around like what a healthy amount of doing is. The other nuance I want to share is, I wrote a post about this yesterday. I don't know if I even articulated my thoughts on this very well. I think business is both easy and hard. And what I mean by that is a lot of what we're doing in business is quite simple. And if we look at it, it's actually not all that hard. I'm showing up on a live stream to have a conversation with you. I've got to post a reel or a carousel, right? I'm going to hop on some calls with clients. Like if we look at the actual tasks we're doing, and if we look at what people are traditionally doing to make the kind of money we all make in business, they're working 80-hour weeks, right? If we think about decades before, what, especially as a woman, like what was available to me, like I probably really would have to like do physical labor, actually work really hard. And so I don't think there's a lot of business where we actually have to work really hard. And I think there are a lot of hard things in business and a lot of challenges, whether they are personal challenges, we put boulders in front of ourselves that we need to move, like our own personal shit, blocks, whatever you want to call that, or just the things that are hard and challenging in terms of putting yourself out there, selling, right? Owning your work, being visible, being uncomfortable, sitting in discomfort, asking for money, having hard conversations with clients, having hard conversations with team, hiring, investing a lot of money before you see results, right? A lot of things that I think are challenging and stretching and hard. So I don't want to say, that's why I said doing more versus does not getting more is the thing to unlearn versus working hard, because I think that gets into a very confusing conversation. Okay, so that's all my nuance there. But coming back to the doing part here, I think the piece I want us to pull away from this is, I think a lot of us just think if I just do more and more, I will get more. I know sometimes my clients, when they're in scarcity, they're like, well, tell me what else to do. Like they just want me to tell them like the more to do. And look, sometimes, yes, you can just keep doing more of the strategy you're doing, but to a certain degree, like you can only do yourself to so much success. And if we think about what scaling is, and what I'm talking about here, which is making more profit, working fewer hours, like that is the definition of scaling. Scaling is increasing essentially your profits without increasing your time, your efforts, your expenses, like what that commensurate, right? So that your profits are outpacing your expenses, your time, your efforts. That's a better way to explain it. So the doing more to get more is actually the opposite of scaling, and everybody will hit a ceiling on that, especially if you're wanting to make 250K years and above. Like I do think you can do to six figures, and in some cases and instances you need to, but really to get past six figures and to do so sustainably, this stops being an effective strategy. And I think there's just a lot of unlearning in that. So from the mindset perspective, again, we can have a whole conversation on that, but I'm just going to share some practicals in terms of what that meant for me in my business. What that really meant for me this year in my business in terms of increasing profit and working less is not this year, in 2023, we built out our data warehouse and our dashboards and UTM tracking. I've always paid attention to data, but I just got that much more, I don't know if sophisticated is the right word. We just got more in place to be able to track it that much more closely. And so I really paid attention to that and used that to drive decisions to really see what is our 80-20, what is driving, and what I mean by 80-20 is what is the 20% of our action or strategy that's driving 20% of results in the business, and got really ruthless with looking at, okay, and then what are all the things we're doing that aren't a part of that 80-20, that are taking up my time, that are taking up my energy, that are taking up expenses, that are nice to have and fun to do, but that aren't giving us enough of an increase in terms of, or enough of a return in terms of the time, energy, or expenses being put in. And I got quite ruthless with cutting those things. As I shared earlier, and I think this is just helpful to hear, one of the things we cut was my podcast. I had my podcast, I think we did 195 episodes. I loved it. I love podcasting. I often think about, like, do I want to bring this back? And who knows, if Facebook groups, die out in the future, because I always want to have these conversations, maybe we'll go back to having the podcast. I genuinely loved it, so it wasn't for that reason. My podcast was bringing me leads, so it wasn't for that reason. But when I looked at what it was doing in my strategy, and when I looked at the 80-20, my podcast and my live stream were doing the same. I was doing more, and I actually wasn't getting more, right? It was the same audience pretty much on both, right? It was fulfilling the same part of my strategy. I was doing more and essentially paying more, because my content is not free to produce. A podcast especially is not free to produce. You have a podcast editor. We were repurposing from it, right? There's the hosting. There's quite a bit there in terms of the marketing side of it. There's team hours for the back end of that. So I was doing more to get exactly the same with that. So that was one thing that we cut. So that was, I cut, I'm just looking at my list here, and the time, I have so many things. But this is an example of, I went through and I was just really, really ruthless with, even if I love this thing, I need to be really mindful of what's the 80-20. And that definitely opened up time and opened up profitability. And it also opened up client spots to be, I have a one-on-one business. So my time all of our time as CEOs are at a premium, but especially if I was cutting my Fridays, right? And I was, in many ways, I was cutting with my Fridays, the number of clients I was holding. I actually cut down my roster in 2024. I don't know what year it is. So I cut my roster down. We were opening it back up a little bit, but I had overbooked myself in 2 years before that to 29 clients. And so I wanted to see, can we make the same money without having as many clients? And I kind of needed that. So I actually cut my roster down and my days down. But because I cut the podcast, I was able, I think that ended up being one spot that we kept that I would have cut otherwise. So I think that's just helpful to see there. I cut how often I was posting. I think that was a really, I'll talk about more of that in the second one, in the next point I'm going to make. One of the other things I cut quite a few things. We cut quite a few just parts of strategy or complication or things we were doing. We just started bringing an extra email to my list. I'm not sure if we're going to keep it. I cut the number of emails we were sending, cut the number of master classes, but all of this was really based on data, and also just seeing where were all the places that me or my team. I also looked at what team was doing, not to cut their hours, but to help us to be more efficient. Where were all the places we were showing up and doing that wasn't bringing us more? We cut a strategy in terms of sharing other Facebook groups. There was just quite a few. There's quite a bit. When I say we shifted a lot this year, So that was a big part of it. I think I'm going to share about ads, but I think ads kind of fall in. Well, I'll share about that at the end. Anyway, I'm going to go on to the next point here, unless I have, Claire says, hey, so happy I could hop on. So glad it's working. I was so bummed when it wasn't working last week. So happy to see you, and let me know, y'all, if you have questions on this. Okay. The third one here that I had to unlearn, again, these are all unlearning, not the things that I started doing. These are the things I had to unlearn. Oh, there was one more thing I stopped doing. I think this actually, because you would not know this, and I think this is helpful to hear unless I shared about it. I stopped creating a course that I had fully mapped out, recorded the whole first module of, put a significant amount of time, energy, coaching time into. I still think is something that I have not seen in our industry. I think it's innovative. I think it's different. I think it's needed. I think it will be great. And I stopped doing it for the reason we're talking about here. I just got really clear on doing more doesn't necessarily get me more. Really looked at where the profitability of my business is, what would be required, how much would be required to do to make that in terms of time, but also what it would mean in terms of giving up one-on-one clients for the marketing side of that. And then I just know the back end of business is enough and how the sausage is made, so to say, in terms of what I would need to spend with ads and what I would need to do with marketing to really make that profitable, and what I would have to give up in terms of, my one-on-one, that is my thing that I love, which is why I'm such a big proponent of don't just chase the top line revenue, right? Chase the thing you want to do and how you want to make that revenue, and pay attention to profitability. And I just decided that was a place where like really just sticking with one offer made more sense. And so I actually stopped, even though I had put, quite a bit. There's a whole, I don't know, there's like 10 videos that I've already recorded for that. Like I was like in on this. The whole thing is mapped out. I stopped doing that. And I think that it definitely opened up a lot of time for me in terms of being able to bring on clients for marketing. But I think long term, if I had gone down that path, not only were we more profitable this year and I was able to pay myself more and all of that, but I think long term in terms of what that's going to do for my business in terms of profitability, scalability, but also my own sustainability is going to be quite big. I think we would have made more top line revenue with that course. I think look, one-on-one, I'm biased, but this is much, much more profitable. A one-on-one model just is more profitable, especially compared to a course model that doesn't have recurring revenue and that generally costs quite a bit in ads. Courses are generally an ads game at a certain point. So if that's just helpful for everybody here who's thinking about courses. So that was another thing that I stopped doing. I hope these are helpful behind the scenes things to hear. Okay, so the third thing I had to unlearn is that you need to post consistently every day to get consistent results in business. I feel like I need to give lots of context and nuance here. First and foremost, context and nuance. I have built my business on consistency. My coach, Lacey Sight, shout out to her. She talks a lot about how your revenue will be as consistent as you are. I agree with that. I mean, we have put something out in my business, some form of content, probably every day for 8.5 years. Like I am incredibly consistent, and I really believe consistency is important for building your own personal self-trust and for the trust you build with your audience and the trust you build with your clients. And I think we don't realize how much we sever our own trust with ourselves as a CEO, but also how much we sever the trust with our audience and people who will potentially hire us when we're really inconsistent. However, I think consistency does not mean you necessarily have to show up every day. I think consistency can look lots of different ways. And I really had to unlearn, because there wasn't, I just think, let's just call it how it was. Like business was just really different in 2020 and before. And I think we really were in a time where, look, the more you posted in some ways, like it didn't, quality of content kind of mattered, but it just wasn't as saturated. There just weren't as many great people, and also people who are full of shit in the online space and to sift through. And so the quality of content mattered, but like there was an element of like consistency and quantity that was driving results. And I've just seen that shift so much. And what I've seen is how, I want to think of how to say this. And they're digging outside on my street, so I hope that noise isn't too loud and distracting. I've always been incredibly intentional. I think I've always been consistent, always have been intentional. I've had my coach reflect that to me. I'm a very, very intentional person. It's what makes me, I think, quite strategic, and I think it helps me get what I want, to be quite honest, in and outside of business. So I am quite intentional. And what I had to see and unlearn in our space, and what I've just seen and I'm really made a difference in marketing and in sustaining multi-six figures, but also being able to pay myself multi-six figures this year, is that intentionality with marketing in particular, and being intentional over the doing and the quantity is really what is winning right now. Look, that might shift. Like who knows what's going to happen in the next couple of years. And so I've really had to shift what I think of and how I think of consistency, and thinking of like I need to create a new piece of content every day. And maybe that's what I should say. We still probably have something go out every day, but that's very different than I'm creating a new piece of content every day, which used to just be, that's how I did things for years. And I also would be batched out like 3 months in advance years ago. And so that sort of consistency, I've just really shifted quite a bit and learned this year, because I've just not seen the correlation to that and getting me results. And I've just seen how instead of this is where like I want to make sure I'm explaining this well, because there's nuance. Consistency absolutely fucking matters. So this is not a conversation to say you don't need to be consistent, permission to just be all over the place or to stop or start your strategy. No, it's not what I'm saying. However, seeing consistency as this needs to look like every single day or 2 times per day, or this really rigid structure, that's the part I really had to unlearn. And what I've really shifted into and what I've really seen is how using intentionality, but really looking at marketing as not just this thing I need to prep 3 months in advance to get done and off a checklist, but really seeing if I'm going to put something out into the world, how can I do so in a way that I'm really clear as to what the intention of, I'm intentional, but what is the intention of this piece of marketing? And how can I make sure my heart is in it? How can I make sure my intention is in it? How can I make sure I'm really connected to this? And that by doing that, even if it's less frequent, if I'm doing that consistently, but even if it's less frequent, that will get me so much more than posting, in air quotes, consistently every day in a way where it's more like, I just got to get this shit out. Let me just try to like cram through writing, I don't know, post for the next 2 weeks, or cram through writing an email sequence for a masterclass. It's sort of like slow down to speed up, maybe is a better way to describe that here. That has definitely given us back time in business, but I have just seen, particularly in this season in our online space, it's almost like it's not worth posting something if it's not intentional and if it's a checklist item. I see, because look, I'm human and sometimes I'm busy and I'm focused on my clients. It's not that I'm not intentional, but sometimes I'm like, oh, let me just like throw this reel together. And I can just tell you, it's like I should have just not even bothered, because that still took me 15 minutes or whatever it took me to do. It's not like it saved me any time to just throw this thing together. But if that intentionality is that hard, if I'm not clear what I'm saying, what I'm doing there, it just falls flat. And if I just waited until, the next day maybe to create something when I had a little bit more space and I could be more intentional about what I want to say, it is just like I can reach 1,000 times more people. It's just, and in terms of what it can do for my business on the back end. And I just think that is, in some ways, a really beautiful thing about the algorithm and the space we're in 2024 or 2025, and who knows what will happen next year. I think in many ways the playing field has been really leveled. It used to be if you didn't have a huge audience or if you weren't paying for ads, it was really hard to get in front of people, right? I think that's why we were posting so much. That's not the case anymore. If you're doing things that are really speaking to your people, that are smart and focused with the SEO, like that are intentional, right? You can have a really small audience and reach so many people that aren't in your audience, especially on platforms like Instagram and TikTok. I think the same is true on LinkedIn. I think there's so many ways in which this is true. And so the playing field has really been leveled. But I think, again, it's not necessarily like spend less time creating content or don't be consistent, but it's being more intentional. And I feel like the theme of this conversation has been, it's do less better. Now, this does not mean I'm spending like forever overthinking a post. I will tell you, when I do that, I also have it fall flat, right? Like that's not what I'm talking about here either. It's just being a little bit more thoughtful of what is the actual intention of this post, of this live stream, of this email, of this masterclass, as opposed to I'm just going to regurgitate what I've always done. I'm just going to repurpose the thing I did a year ago. I'm just going to say like something really like slap this together. That's the difference I'm talking about. The other thing I will really say that comes up for me here that I've just seen make a really big difference for us, that I don't know if I had to unlearn this or relearn this. I feel like I had to relearn this. I feel like I wrote a post, maybe it's going out next week, about this, and I'm like on a little rant here, so I don't have any questions. I have always loved creating content. I love my business. I love my work. I love to work. I have a lot of fun in my business. I have a lot of fun with my clients. I had a lot of fun my last VIP day. I've always had a lot of fun creating content. But I think somewhere along the way, I also got into, like, I think most of us, right, we're more than one thing. We're dichotomous in that way. And I can also be very serious. So I can be both ex-actress, playful, I don't know, whatever you want to call that, theatrical, and I can also be quite serious, like that type A, got straight A's in school, like that personality type. And I think somewhere along the way in business, that part kind of took over, and it's almost like that part of me sucked some of the joy out of content creation. And I think this year I unlearned some of that. It's almost like I unlearned some of that, like, school. I don't even think it's an employee mentality, because I've like barely had real jobs. Ex-actors, right? Like waiting tables, like I worked in advertising for a second, but even that, like, we had fun for a living. But it's almost like it helped me to unlearn some of that mentality where it's like you need to be really serious to get results. And I've just seen how leaning into the more playful, light, I don't want to say taking it less seriously, because I actually take my work quite seriously, but it's just more of that like fun pplayfulness side. What an asset that is to bring to your business and to your marketing, and just like unlearning some of that like seriousness, or maybe it's pressure. How does unlearning and unhooking from some of that, what a difference that makes. And I think that has been a really big shift I've made this year. I've had more fun, I think, in my business. I always have fun in my business, but I think I've just had more fun with creating content. And I can see it. I mean, and I can see it in the results. I can see it in the reach. I can see it in our last masterclass. We got the number of signups, and our number of our organic signups are like double than what we usually got. It like blew my mind a little bit. I think part of it is I just had more fun with the marketing. I don't know if the marketing was that good in air quotes, but I think people can feel that. I think people can feel when we're having fun and enjoying our work, and we want to be here and we want to share what we're sharing, versus I'm just doing this because I'm supposed to. I'm like trying to be so serious, or I'm trying to prove something. And I think playful is almost a confusing word, because I think that makes it seem like we need to be like, I don't know, bubbly or like dancing in our reels. I don't mean that. It's just enjoying it more, maybe is the word. Taking it, putting less pressure, not taking everything so seriously, or not taking yourself so seriously. And I think that's for lots of reasons, right? We could have a whole conversation about the energetics of that, but I still got 2 points I want to share with you. We're coming up on a very long live stream. But I think there's also something too we have to think about with AI coming in, and what ChatGPT, like if it smells like ChatGPT content. Like, I love me some AI. We use ChatGPT for kind of like the editing process or the brainstorming process sometimes, but ChatGPT can't bring your essence, right? It can't bring your enjoyment for something. And so I think that's probably also why, just strategically, I have a hunch like bringing more, I think it always does and performs better for you, but I think currently, given what the mix of content and marketing we're seeing, I do think having that infused just stands out, because that is not going to be infused when AI is writing everything for you. Okay. Let's go to the next one, unless I have, let's see. Dana says, when I get so serious, I feel totally blocked and stressed. Fun is such a powerful accelerator and turns up the authenticity. It's exactly that, Dana. Thank you for, Dana, we could have a whole conversation on this, but I'm sure you probably talk about this in your work. There are studies on this, like the power of play and creativity, and how like when you're playing and like play, like there's a whole science to play in terms of what it opens up. And I think for CEOs in particular, the play and the creativity side, like that is where innovation comes from and new ideas come from. And I could go down a whole rabbit hole here, but like just almost like learning to like tap into that child, not the childlike personality and ego and like mind in that way, but in terms of when we could like see a pen and see like 45 uses for it, and like turn this into like a magic superhero with a cape, right? Like that kind of creative thinking, versus like a pen is only a pen, which tends to happen more and more serious. Anyway, I could geek out on this. I'm going to return us back to the point of this conversation, but I just really appreciate you saying that, Dana. It is, I think it is just powerful in ways that we sometimes forget, especially when we're in the online space. And I think sometimes trying to prove things or come across a certain way. Okay, let's go to the next one. So one of the next things I had to unlearn, this one might surprise you, but I really had to unlearn this to sustain multi-six figures, to pay myself multi-six figures. I think this one, and I still remember I worked less this year, so this is not going to make sense, but I'm going to explain it. But that is, I had to unlearn delegating everything to scale. So nuance on all of these. I am team delegate. I delegate quite a bit. I invest heavily in team and coaching. I am actually just onboarding, or just hired someone new today for our team. So I'm big on team support and big on delegating, especially as a one-on-one coach, holding the number of clients I do. I would be doing a disservice to my clients' investments if I did not invest in team, because I would be holding too much and I would not be able to show up fully for them, to serve them, to prioritize them in their investment, or to show up for you, to create content, right? To be able to have the fun we were just talking about, and the creativity. And I would not be able to scale in a way in which my revenue and my profit is increasing, or it's outpacing the time, effort, and expenses we're spending. So I'm really big on delegation. And this is something I've always believed, but I think when I got overbooked, so in 2020 and 21, I got overbooked with 29 clients. And so they're really, like, the solution for me was just throw money at the solution essentially, or like the problem essentially, and delegate and work a lot. Like, because my clients will always be my top priority aside from my team, I'm never going to not show up for someone's investment. I would let a client go before that. So that was the solution. We were also building out infrastructure and systems and processes on the back end. So I invested probably more than I needed to in team, but it was exactly what I needed to because I was quite overbooked. But in that season, one of the things I sort of forgot that I've just always believed in, and that I think helped me to accidentally on purpose get overbooked, but that's helped me in business a lot, is I really believe and stand by the principle of doing things that don't scale to scale. I heard that phrasing from Rich Litvin. I always want to give credit where credit is due, but I really and truly think if you look at the top brands, the top companies, the top businesses, the top people in our space, yes, of course, it is important to think about scalability and doing things to scale. But if you really look at what they are trying to do, what everybody is trying to do is find ways to come back to before they were scaling, to do some of those things that didn't scale at scale, or to do things that don't scale to continue to scale, even if it's not a scalable strategy, because those strategies are so potent and powerful. And so this year, I feel like I had to unlearn some of that, like, just delegate everything mentality, and still delegate plenty. Like, please do not hear that wrong, depending on what level of business you're at. I think we can also delegate too soon, but that's a different conversation. But I really just had to come back to certain things where it's like, what are the things that I need to take back on that I cannot do at scale, right? If I do that, that's not like scaling in traditional square. Like, what can I not do? What are the things that you can't do at scale that will help me scale? Because I just see what a differentiator that is, and that's really, like, that is important to me for the quality. Like, I care. I'm like mindful of how I want to say this. I am very available to make $1 million in my business. I care about making more money in my business. If I never make more money than I'm making presently, I'm good. What I care about is continuing to evolve my work and the quality of work and the quality of my service and my ability to support my clients to get results, and my thought leadership and my coaching. Like, that to me is my, like, top priority in business, and what I care about pretty much over anything. Obviously I care about money, but like, I'm just mindful because I don't want someone to hear this as like, oh, I shouldn't care about money, or like, oh, you're like such a saint. Like, of course I want to make more fucking money, but like, that's just not my top priority. This is. And so doing things that don't scale to scale means not delegating everything to scale so that you can have that differentiator, in my opinion, right? This is not for everybody. But so some things that look like, and if this is just helpful to hear, is I took back content creation this year. Again, what I shared at the beginning is I used to have a copywriter. I used to have someone who created a lot for me. This is not right for everybody. This is not right for everybody's business model. But I cared deeply about the quality of my content. I saw content going a really different. December, November of last year, I really saw our industry shifting in terms of what was working. I also just believe if I'm ever gonna delegate content again, I always wanted to have my own voice and, like, for me to have my own stamp, and I can't know, and I can't coach my clients around what's working in air quotes if I'm not kind of in the trenches doing it myself. So I took back content. There was nothing scalable about doing that. Outside of, I guess, I'm not paying my copywriter, and so, like, in that way, like, it just in terms of expenses, but in terms of my time, like, that's not scalable. But it was, I think, one of the best decisions I made. It has helped our marketing so much, and just like the learnings and being in the data, like, just in terms of supporting clients, but also things like going back to doing personal reach outs. I did limit my hours and my spots, but I still made capacity to, I think at the beginning of the year, we actually offered some free coaching calls, and we've done more giveaways this year. None of that is something that helps me scale. And all of that is something that helps me scale, right? Like, I'm in the DMs with people. Like, if you DM me, it is me that responds to you. It might take me 2 days, but it is me that responds to you. There's nothing scalable about me doing that, especially when I have a fully booked business. And all of that helps me to scale. I am in Basecamp with my clients. I, like, line by line edit their content. I give very thoughtful responses. I respond, sooner than I need to. None of that is scalable, in air quotes, in particular, except for it is completely scalable in terms of it helps scale the quality of my work. And I also have a revenue share model. So of course my clients, if they make more, they get better results, like that does actually pay me. But I never stopped doing that, but just to give some content here, I think if I just was looking traditionally, like how business teaches to scale, these are all things that would be very easy to do. Like, get a marketing company to do your content or copywriter. Get ManyChat, or just have someone in your DMs for people. Definitely don't offer free calls, and to stop offering content reviews, and just respond with like short, like one sentence responses, or like just short things in between session with clients. You'd open up so much time. You could have more than clients on your roster. You could, in the short term, make more money. And I think in the long term, it would absolutely damage the quality of my work, my clients' experience, and their investment. My clients work with me for like 4 or 5 years. Like, I have plenty of clients like that. Like, I think it would harm renewals, and I think it would harm the scalability of our business long term. So I think that's a little counterintuitive, but that's just definitely been a big one this year. Let me know if y'all have questions around that one, because I think that one maybe also sounds like it's contradictory to the one where we said like doing more to get more, like not doing more. I think that can sound like it's doing more, but coming back to this, it was very intentional doing more and what I was taking back on my plate and not delegating, in terms of these are the things that make sense for me to do. These are the things that might not be scalable and might take some time, but I can just see how impactful this is. I can see that taking the time to write back to someone who's probably never going to hire me in their email, but having that relationship and building a community. I care about the community I'm building, even if like most people are never going to hire me in my community, right? I can see the impact for that long term in my business. It makes sense for me. It feels good to take that back, even if there's not like a direct ROI tomorrow. So it was very intentional versus like, I'm just now gonna like do more busy work, or we're gonna like now add on, like we're gonna put the podcast back on our plate because like, let's just do more and more shit. So hopefully that difference makes sense, but if not, let me know. Okay, oh my gosh, I did not expect this to be this long, y'all. Okay, I'm gonna share, I've got one more and then one more like really quick like summary on this. I hope this is valuable to hear the behind the scenes. I hope this is helpful. I'm not always sure with these if this is helpful for y'all. Okay, so the last one here that I had to unlearn. So this is an interesting one, because I kind of all of these have nuance, but I had to unlearn pick and stick and rinse and repeat what's always worked. So let me give nuance here and context. I still believe in pick and stick in terms of like pick and stick with a niche, pick and stick with a strategy, pick and stick with an offer, kind of rinse and repeat, build that well-oiled machine in your business. I still really believe in that. This is what I coach my clients around. I have one offer that I have had and built. We're going to cross 1.6 million soon in the last about 6 years. That's from one offer, right? That's from one core strategy. So I really believe in the power of picking and sticking. And what I had to unlearn, and I think maybe unlearn is it, because I think I knew this, but what I focused on is maybe a better way to say this. What I focused on a lot this year is looking at what have we just been rinsing and repeating and doing because that's the way we've always done things and that's what's always worked. And how can we take a look under the dashboard, under the hood at the data to see, is this still working? Does this still make sense in 2024 as we're going into 25? Are we doing this just because we did this in 2020? Are we doing this because it was a response to being overbooked in 2020? Are we doing this, like, why are we doing this? Like, does this even make sense? How does this contribute to my client's experience, to my client's result, to my team, to our bottom line, to our profitability, right? How can we actually take a look at why are we doing the things we're doing instead of just blindly picking and sticking, so that kind of what I was sharing before, we can call some of the things that were really great decisions and great strategies or great things to pick and stick with, right? I mean, I did 195 podcast episodes. That's my second podcast I've had in this business. It's not like I did 3 podcast episodes or like 10 and then stopped, right? I clearly picked and stuck with that, if that's the right grammar, or right tense then. And we took a look at it. It's like, but I'm just continuing to do this because I've just committed to always doing this. And I feel like this is just what I'm supposed to do, as opposed to, does this make sense in this season? Is this contributing to the current long-term results and kind of like the current vision, and like what's a top priority in this business, and fill in all of the things there and what I know to be true in terms of what would be required to grow this podcast, for example, and blow this up in the business. And so just taking a look at that, and then also taking a look at what are the things we've been rinsing and repeating, and how can we do them, if we're keeping them, how can we do them better? I talk a lot about doing less better. This has been the year of that. And so this year, more than any year, I've cut more things, I've refined way more things, but we've also added things in. So not jumping around, but like ads are a great example. I've been in business, March, I'll have been in business 9 years. I grew to my first 1.495 million. So basically like 5,000 or 10,000 short of 1.5 million was all with organic marketing. And that is something that I've just picked and stuck and rinse and repeat. And this year I really need to look at, what does my business need? How do I see things going? I really do think we're going to be, this is one of my predictions for next year, but I just think, not every business, but I just think traffic is a little different than before. And I just really saw the benefit of traffic. I also have a crazy high conversion rate. So you could also just see how, in some ways, paying for traffic is the cheapest, counterintuitive, but like cheapest way to make money in our business. Ads are actually cheaper for us than organic marketing, believe it or not, but that's like almost a whole different conversation. But yes, you can hear that again. Ads cost us less than my organic marketing because of time and team for myself and what my time is worth and what I pay my team. We have such a great cost per lead. Like, it is just cheaper for us to run ads at this point. And we need a combination. But point being here, because otherwise I'll go down a rabbit hole, is that if I had just done what I've always done, I'd be like, but I am the organic marketing queen. Like, that's what we do. That's what's always worked for us. That's how we got fully booked. That's how we've been fully booked for 6 years. That insert, right? I think it would have been really hard for me to look at. And things have shifted. Things have changed. What's true today? What's working today? Where are opportunities to refine? If we're cutting this, we have resources and time. So we want to reallocate it somewhere else. And so this has really been a year of, I think more than anything, like, just really embracing that and running with that. And I do not think this makes sense for every business. It depends on where you're at. If you're growing your business, you probably do need to pick and stick and have enough data to be able to make those choices, unless you're doing like all the things. And then yes, you probably want to cull some things, but really refining strategies and looking at what to cut and what to add on strategically based on data, based on what our what my personal and my business like current and long-term goals are. It has just really made such a difference in my business this year, but it has been such a willingness to also, I think sometimes you'll have a hard time picking and sticking, but I think once you pick and stick, if you've been doing the same thing and it's worked for 5-6 years, I think there can be such an unwillingness to adapt to change. And I think this has just been a year of more change than any other in my business. And I have just really loved it, but I just also really see how that is so much of entrepreneurialism and of scaling. And so that's kind of my last, Dana says, that's amazing. So many episodes, gold for anyone who listens in. Thank you for saying that. We still have the private podcast, which are these live streams, but I do miss one question. I do love it. We might have to bring the concept to Instagram stories or something. But Dana, thank you for saying that. The last thing, I'm going to close out here because y'all, I've talked on an hour for this. I did not expect that. What I did not learn this year was how to become concise. I'm still working on that. I've got my Instagram posts just to the caption instead of like the 3 captions. Any of my OG people know Instagram, I used to just like have 4 what is it called, in the comments. I just like have 4 comments because I was so long-winded. Don't be like me. That's really not a good move on Instagram, except for now that they've got more carousel slides. I have like 20 fucking carousel slides. That is something I'm still working on. I am not concise. I like want to give it all to you. Though I will say, speaking of learning to not just rinse and repeat what's always worked, I did really study my master classes this year and see how sometimes a little too long-winded, and I took money and threw it at some ads to run a private test on a masterclass that was more concise to see how they performed. And I think I share that because I think these are the things we don't always hear about and don't always know. We're like, how is someone getting those results? Or, how are they like getting such great signups or whatever that is? This is almost like a whole nother conversation I need to do a live stream on. What I really see in myself and see in my clients who are getting big results and see my peers is there's just such a willingness to test things and such a willingness to not just do something once and expect it to be perfect and the way it's always going to be, and really to not just look at refining, but to look at, let me be willing to spend some money on something that is literally just so that I can test this and to see, what the difference is and what results that yields. Same with Instagram posts. I have some duds out there, some reels, because I just really wanted to test something. Anyway, it's a whole nother conversation, but I think it falls into that rinse and repeat what's always worked. And I'm hoping just hearing that is helpful because, again, I think sometimes it's just easy for someone to share results and to hear those, or to hear, I shared an email this week about a client who scaled to 600K. I shared about my client who scaled to multi 6 figures, 7 figures, and to hear that and to think, and just to see the surface level things people are doing and not always understanding some of the nuance behind the scenes. So I know it's only a 1 hour conversation, but it's why I have a hard time being concise. I'm hoping it is helpful and valuable. But the last piece I wanted to kind of like tie everything up in a bow. My biggest lesson, my biggest reminder, this is something I've just always believed to be true, but I think that this year and all of these unlearnings and just the changes we've made and just, I think it's been such a transformative, it's like in many ways nothing has changed and I'm doing less than ever in like simplified things, and so many things have changed, and I think there's just been a lot of transformation in the business personally because of that as a result. But what is really reinforced for me, and I'm sure I've talked about this every year in different ways, but I just really and truly like want to land the plane on this concept, is that nothing is static in and out of business. And I think kind of what I was talking about with the testing piece, I think people get themselves into hot water. This is not calling anyone out, but I think the more you just want things to be the way they've always been and to work the way they've always worked, and want to cling on to that in the past, and like, but this is what we did 3 years ago, or this is how our relationship was 3 years ago, or this is what used to work in my business, or this is what like worked to get me fully booked 2 years ago. The more we want to cling on to that, the harder time we have looking at what does make sense to hold on to, that we need to refine and adapt and evolve, because seasons change, people change, industries change, innovation changes, technology changes, the world changes. What is it? It's like the Ferris Bueller quote. It's like, what's that quote from the movie? Someone will know it. It's like if you don't pause, like, okay, I'm not even going to try to pull it up. It's like in my brain, but I can't pull it up. But it's the Ferris Bueller quote. But I really think it is, it's that there's a nuance here and there's a fine line, because I know for some of my like super innovators and super dreamers and super visionaries, I think as a coach, I can walk both lines. So I can help ground my visionaries, but I can also help pull up my people who are like too stuck in the like not being able to see that vision. I think I do a great job of kind of being the yin to people's yang there. I think if you're a super visionary, you don't have a problem with this, and sometimes you need to be pulled back and tempered just a little bit, because you can almost be too all over the place and like throwing things at the wall and never letting something stick and work, and working something long enough so that it can be refined and maximized. That is something I think is absolutely essential, right? We have to keep, my strategy is essentially the same, right? We have to keep doing the same thing and making it better and better. And on the flip side of that, I think a lot of us can get just so stuck, right? Like, I think it's a safety mechanism. This is what worked before. It feels scary to try something new. I don't want to fail, especially as you become more successful. Look, I don't know, maybe this makes me sound like an asshole, but I think it's just true. It's just easier to fail when you have 30 people in your audience, right? It's just easier to fail when you're not making money and no one's paying attention. It's just easier to go and test because the stakes are a little bit lower. I just think I see this in my clients who have bigger businesses. There just are higher stakes. There's higher stakes when you've got you've got teams to pay, when I'm the breadwinner for my family, when you've got way more people watching. And I think we have to learn how to like see, like hold that dichotomy and hold like our responsibilities, but also see if we only stay doing what we've always been doing because that's what feels safe, that is the quickest way. I always use this example, but that's the quickest way to become the Blockbuster of your industry. Blockbuster didn't think it was going to go out of business. Blockbuster like probably thought Netflix was fucking crazy. I mean, I don't know the ins and outs there, but Blockbuster was just so fixated on not evolving with the time, and they didn't evolve. It's like they waited too long and they went out of business, and they were like they were a huge company at one point. And there's so many examples of that. So I have stopped doing more things this year than worked ever in my business. And I think it has helped us to thrive and to grow in ways where I'm seeing the results now, but I can also see the trajectory of like how those results are going to compound. I've also started and learned more things, I think, this year than I have probably since my first year in business. I mean, I learned ads. I bought a course on that. I invested in coaching on that. Like, I'm really proud of that. I learned a new skill set. Like, that is a genuine skill set. But that's also what my business required of me. And so I think that's just the other piece here. Like, nothing is static in and outside of business. But I also think, and if this is just helpful to hear in terms of, increased profits, working less hours, that was the result of not because I was like, I don't want to work, like, I'm just going to raise my rates. I actually did not raise my rates. I haven't raised my rates in years. It's not like I just like charged more and like was like, peace out, I'm going to pay attention less. I really looked at, what does my business require for me? What does my business need for me? I am just so willing to do what my business asks of me and needs of me, and the industry asks and needs of me, with boundaries. I know what I am and am not willing to do, right? Like, I'm not going to sell that course we were talking about. And equally, just have been really willing to be a beginner, to learn, to try, to test, to fail, to refine. And so those would be my takeaways for you. I think those are the things, if we look into 2025, like those are the elements, like some of the specifics might change, but I think those mindsets, that approach will only continue to serve me, continue to serve you if some of those landed for you. And so that's definitely what I'm taking into 2025. And with that willingness of everything I'm talking about, like I think that's one of the biggest gifts I've given myself. I only offer one-on-one, right? I have all these things where it's like, this is what I do, and I'm so willing to change my mind and to make a new decision, right? We only did organic marketing until we didn't. And so I think being able to hold that is like, I'm so decided, I'm so all in on this, and I'm also so willing to change my mind when that's what my business or the industry is really asking of me, when it's still in alignment, of course. Like, I'm never going to do something that feels out of integrity or that's just like so against my values or what I want. Okay, those are a lot of words, y'all. I hope that this was valuable for you. Let me know if you're watching now or in the replay, if I'm going to do a predictions episode next year, but let me know if you want something more in the mindset around any of this, if any of that felt interesting to you, because I'll think about our next year's specific live streams. And I put this to Instagram, but I talked quite a bit about content today. I've been thinking just about how I'm thinking about content differently in terms of the lenses than how I used to think about content and content creation. So let me know if that's something you want a live stream on as well. And then this is our last live stream of the year. So thank you all for being here. Again, if you're interested in working with me, I have very, very, very limited spots opening up in Q1 of next year, Q2, who knows what that'll look like. So if you are interested in working with me, if you're interested in one-on-one support, I really partner and go quite deep with my clients. I am looking for the right fit clients for those few spots, and I love working with people who are growing to those first 6 figures and building out your strategy for that consistency and reliability and really learning how to think like a CEO. I also love, love, love helping clients scale and double and triple your revenue in a sustainable way, in a way that is profitable, in a way that's really aligned to your long-term vision and goals, and not just chasing top-line revenue for the sake of top-line revenue, but really in a way that, feels really good and also lets you pay yourself more. I will drop a link for a free coaching consultation. I will obviously be in the new year since we're wrapping up this year, but I would love to connect with those of you who are craving that kind of support and really craving coaching support. I feel like that's an important thing to say. I'm not going to be for everyone. I'm okay with that. There's a lot of other great programs out there. I am a coach. I'm absolutely still a mentor. I put the mentor hat on from time to time. I absolutely partner with my clients. Like, I'm in it with my clients, but I'm also very, very much a coach, in which we are coaching and co-creating and working this together. And I'm really looking for the clients who, coaching can be a little bit confronting. It can be a little bit challenging, but I just see that's how my clients get the biggest results, because we're working on the real stuff and not always just the surface level stuff. I can put together a strategy for anyone, but helping you step into your power, helping you learn how to think like a CEO, helping you to feel safer in your business, to take up space, to show up, to lead a team, right? To get supported, to work through the crunchiness of receiving more money, holding more money, all of that. That's usually means we've got to excavate some stuff and work through some stuff. So that feels important to say, because I want to connect with the person who's looking for that work. But I promise y'all, I've worked with my coach for 6.5, 7 years. I don't even know how many years. I just renewed with her again. That's what I'm working on with her, and it is the 90%. The strategy part is so easy when you got that piece and when you put them together. Like, it is why I think my clients get incredible results and why I love working with my clients long term. Okay. Love you all. That is my spiel. I'm looking forward to whoever I get to work with next. Have the best holiday. We will not be live until the new year. This is our last live stream for the year. I hope whatever you celebrate, whatever you are doing, you have the most wonderful holiday season. Thank you for spending part of your year this with me. This has been a really beautiful year in this business, and one of the things I really cherish is this community. I do not take for granted that you are here. I do not take for granted that you hang out with me. I love getting to share these. So just thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. Wishing you the best holiday, the best new year. Let me know what y'all are doing. And Dana says thank you. And I can't wait to see y'all next year.